What's up, everybody? We back with another message, another video. Thank you to all my new subscribers and future new subscribers. You know we do nothing here without God because everything is spiritually led by God over here. We cover the world from a spiritual and physical aspect to get the raw, real, and uncut answers. So anything you hear, anything you see in these end times, may you test the spirits, aka take the words back to God, visuals back to God in prayer. Form that strong bond with God. You're going to need it because there's a lot of Decepticons running around in these end times sent by the enemy himself, okay? So today, I just want to kind of give you guys a message that God had given me through talking about my parents, okay? And the first thing that I want to say, the theme of this message is through every struggle, there is a door behind it that can be opened once you push through it and become obedient to the Lord, okay? Push through and be obedient to the Lord. Now, when it comes to my parents, you know, the Lord brought up the situation that happened to me. And today, my mom ended up, you know, talking to me about what happened, apologized for it. And it was a beautiful thing, you know. Um, and then he started talking to me about both my parents and about generational curses that lead to struggles. And so I'm just going to put it all together here. So about starting with my dad, actually, because he faster one to get through. Um, my dad would have dreams from God. You know, he would actually ask God. He asked God for a son. God sent him a blue jay. Now, where we stayed, look, it wasn't no blue jays showing up at all. I ain't never seen no blue jays. So, for him to see that, that was nothing but God, and my dad knew it was God. Okay, and you know, he said God would play with him in his dreams as a child. So that was to show me that my dad, God was communicating with my dad, and he had dreams and stuff. And also another thing that happened before I had ended up going to the hospital, the Lord gave my dad a dream about me calling him, telling him that I was in the hospital, going to the hospital. And it happened weeks later, and that's how God miraculously healed me from what was wrong with me. But my dad was the one that told me through his dream what happened. So God was expressing to me that he grew up with his different struggles, and but he always was there for his family. He always helped out and gave back, and you know, honored his parents and his mother. And you know, even not having a like that real father figure, he did not turn out to be like the rest uh that attempted to raise him. My dad went through a lot by himself, and he came up. And so, you know, through his struggle, he is where he is today, in the situation where he is, because he prays every night. You know, he has God. Because God was asking me about my parents, like, what do you think? Do you think they deserve to go with me? And I said, I had to think and say yes, because they introduced me to you as a child. And one thing my dad would always say was, or a couple of things, no matter what, anything you want, you know, you got to go to God and ask, because he'll give it to you. But don't think that it's going to come free. You got to work for it. He also said at the time, you know, of course, that means be obedient to the Lord. But at the time, I didn't know that. To me, it was just like, okay, well, work in the job, you got to work to get to it, you know. But that was me being a kid. And my dad would also say, make sure no matter what you do, if anything, make sure you follow those 10 commandments. He always used to say that to me as a kid. And so, you know, God was giving me these mental downloads, and I'm like, he says, even through all the struggles, you know, he made sure he was there for you when there was an absence of father figure in his life physically, not God. God was always there, but I said, you're right. He has always been there for me, and I'm thankful. He says, even though he does not understand, he has that more logical mindset. It's just because the world, that's what the world does. And when you're raised that way, to have that form of way of thinking, or, you know, raised in the worldly ways, you know, that's what happens. And this becomes a generational curse, because people raise a kids without introducing God. And then, so it's really not the kid's fault. It's the pattern and generational curse, because of parents not teaching their kids. And he said, no matter what, your father still really talks to you. And he said he doesn't realize that he was supposed to have these type of gifts. He just couldn't, he didn't tap into them because he just wasn't given an understanding. Back then, it wasn't a lot of talk like this about this prophetic stuff. It wasn't. And so, like it is today, so, I had to understand, I'm like, you're right. He said, you just because somebody doesn't understand you don't mean that they don't care for you, and that doesn't mean that they don't love you. It just means that they are stuck in that generational way of thinking. So you are the first in your family to break this curse, and people will see it through your life. I said, oh my goodness, Holy Spirit, you're right. He says, through every struggle you're going through, you are still going to make it because I'm here and you keep being obedient and you're pushing. Then he talked about my mom, and it's a lot with her. He's saying, remember, he says, at birth, the devil tried to kill both you and her, but y'all made it through. She had struggles when she was younger. You know, she was picked to do have a lot of responsibilities, even though she was the middle in age, and she was the one that really took care of a lot of things. And he reminded me like he took care of her mother, my grandmother, when all the other sisters had been moved away and nobody else really or had a grudge against their mother. But my mom, no matter how my grandmother had been to her when she was younger, she still honored her mother, honored thy mother and thy father. She held to that, whether she realized it or not. And she did it with barely no help, yet still being in the household with us, because I was 19 at the time, and doing what she was doing. Like, she really working midnights 2 and 3 days in a row, then still getting up and taking care of her mother, and then still being around the house. So I understand what she went through. And when you know what happened to my mama, all her sisters and everybody else didn't give her not a single thing out of the house my grandmother lived in. And just even still didn't treat my mom like right, you know. Um, and my uncle was living with my grandmother, and he was struggling too. The devil was trying to work in his life to put him on forms of drugs because he was going through too much. And they both was going through it, my grandmother and my uncle. My grandmother went through dementia, but I feel like it was a form of judgment for her because of the way she would treat certain people, because she would talk about certain people from the past that she may not have treated as well. Like, she said something about somebody reminding her of something she did. So I think that was God's way of, kind of giving her that sense of, in her last days and months, like everything she kind of had did, but she still had my mom. And you know what? Sometimes she would forget, but she never. That's another thing. Before I even knew that God had picked me to be chosen, she always remembered who I was. I was like the only grandchild she got to see because I was with my mom when she was, I would go with them sometimes to the doctor's appointments and stuff. But she always remembered me. My grandmother, going through dementia, no matter at what stage, she always remembered me. She never forgot me. She would say something crazy to my mom, but then like look at me and just, it was different. And that there was a big sign to me about God picking me to be chosen, because every time she looked at me, she just remembered who I was. She never forgot. And that's how I know God was kind of the one that was putting her through certain things as far as the dementia stuff, because, but he would remind her of things that she had done, but she would look at me, that hole would be kind of released off her. She would look at me and realize who I was. I just, oh my goodness, God just taking me through my memories. But with my mom, she dealt with a lot, and you know, dealing with certain treatment from people and trying to hi birds and trying to express herself to people. She would talk to me a lot. So the day that my grandmother passed, I remember staying up all night and I couldn't understand why. I just couldn't go to sleep. And then it was God speaking through me right then. My mom came in and told me my grandmother passed away. And then I told her, she was kind of feeling like it was her fault because she allowed her to go to the homes and hospice. But I told my mom, someone told me to tell my mom. So God kept me up all night just to catch my mom in that moment, because he knew it was time for her to go. And I told my mom, no, you did everything you could. You was the only one that did it. She ain't suffering no more. Like, I'll never forget seeing her in the hospital. She heard us but couldn't speak to us. Nothing. She reacted. And I'm just like, oh. So it's just little moments like that that I remember. And then I look at my mom and said, that was her mother. And I know that that was difficult. And then my mom, after that, working midnights at her job, got people, because she's good at her job, you got people that gets jealous of you and treat you any certain way. My mom doesn't realize that she had a certain gift as well. It may not have been the same thing as my dad's, but God was expressing to me, like, you know how you just have somebody that it's just natural at telling the truth, and God is nothing but truth, and that's my mom. Like, and she has this way to do it, and she has this way to just know, when somebody ain't being upfront with her. Like, she's really smart, but she knows. And so, God was expressing to me, your mom went through a lot, and even with you and her almost dying, she saved me from getting an incorrect shot when I was a baby. Like, this woman, and God told me about this. The devil had somebody tell this nurse to give me this shot, but it was not for me. It would have killed me. And that was another attempt from the devil, but my mom caught it because she had water in her eyes and everything. She went through a lot. So her eyes cleared up in a sense. She saw it and told the nurse no. She corrected the nurse. It's just like, oh, it's crazy. And just she even lost her brother, my uncle. That I see. That's another thing. Was one of the first people that was shown when my mom was pregnant. My mom showed him, and I think he touched her stomach or something like that, and she showed him the ultrasound. And it's like I have this memory of my uncle, who passed away, and I didn't meet him, but it's like we touched each other's hands through her. It was different, like, but I was looking from on the outside. It was like a memory I have, but I wasn't a lot like, well, I can't say alive. I wasn't outside of my mom at that point. And then I see him walking out the front door of our old house, and he like smiled into a sadness because he didn't want people to see what he was really going through. He was the type to try to be strong for a lot of people, and then he ended up passing away not too long after that. And I don't know. It's like I know my uncle, but I don't, because of how much God has spoken to me about him. Ugh. But back to my mom. She came in and she apologized for what happened and that she truly didn't remember. And I had to forgive. I wasn't like, I had already forgiven, but I was still like kind of mad about it. But I realized it's not my parents' fault that they don't understand me because of the way that they were raised. I cannot blame my parents for that. And it's hard for us to understand sometimes why people don't understand us, but I understand. Like, I am here to break generational curses, and it's hard because people aren't going to understand what that looks like, you know? And even though the devil came through to try to use my mom to do certain things, he knows. Let me tell y'all something else. In 2022, God miraculously healed me from an issue, but my mom got lined up to be saved from something very, very detrimental and got successful surgery on something. And God gave me a dream a year prior to that about it. My dad had problems last year too, and it was a situation where we got really concerned because he wasn't answering his phone. But God was like, "You trust me?" I said, "Yeah." But my mom, to make her feel better, we went out looking anyway. But he was okay. When we got back, he was at home, and I said, "I only did it for my mom, but I knew God was gonna do it." He really saved all of us because I honestly think my dad was having a heart attack, symptoms of a heart attack, but God diverted that. Like, the devil tried to take us all out, but God said no. So he really does look out for family. And my parents may not understand who I am in full, but I'm okay with that because that's been a part of my struggle dealing with that. Part of my struggle has been dealing with the enemy. Part of my struggle has been having to wait on God for things while things weren't going my way at the time. You know, and the devil is trying to turn me against my parents and them against me, per se. And these birds are always on guard. It's dark. I love it as it's getting warmer out a little bit because it's just sitting there. And that's always how I used to be when I do messages in the summer when I first started. I'm telling you, they be disguised as angels. I'm not even playing. But generational curses need to be broken in this hour, and they will be, and God will show things. You know, my family, there's this thing with my family where we aren't as close on my mom's side, but there's another part that is having a family reunion, and everybody's getting invited from all the sides. God said he was going to bring back families in this time, and I'm seeing this being formed. I'm seeing this being formed. So it went from everything not going my way to good news left and right, and me getting a very good understanding, you know, of how strong my parents truly are. And they've always been there and done a lot for me, always been there for me. We've been there for each other. So God was letting me know that how he viewed my parents and how even you know, your parents could have had something very special, but because of the generational curses, they never knew that they were supposed to be chosen. They never knew that God had a purpose for them. They kind of missed it. God still loved them, but because of that generational curse and lack of knowledge and information, you know, that was what happened. And I'm just blessed and thankful that God sees my parents in that light. Because you got to remember, people aren't perfect, and we all do things that we either weren't supposed to do or we aren't supposed to do. And sometimes we get affected by other people's decisions, but it doesn't mean that those people don't care about you. It just means that, you know, the enemy is trying to play the role into making hate come from you. And that's what I've learned from my situation and learned from my struggles. There's always going to be a big door open, no matter what. So I hope y'all take this message and can apply it to yourselves about struggles and doors opening, about generational curses. Peace and blessings, and I will catch you guys in the next one.
Lucky me, lucky, lucky, lucky me. I won, got it done. Lucky, lucky, lucky me. Lucky, lucky, lucky. I won't let the door hit when I leave. I guess that I was born beneath a very lucky star, and in a week or two I won't remember who you are. Man down, he ran out of luck and now it's my time. Ain't no looking back, I'm on the right track.